Class is in session. How you guys doing? It is Unlearn 16, and it's just me. You just get me on this podcast. But I'm going to go a little bit of a different route. This is something I've never done before, so you guys can be my first. I'm going to talk about a lesson plan that I'm sort of in the middle of. I'm going to explain it to you, why I did it, how it came about, what I'm including, all of it. Right? I'll try to go piece by piece by piece. So if anybody wants to like sort of mimic it or use it or whatever, have at it. This is my gift. Or maybe it's not a gift. I don't know. You haven't even heard it yet. So maybe you're going to think, wow, that sounds horrible. All right, here's how it started. Can I ask Americans one question before we get started? How is it that you don't get to know what happened to JFK until 2038? And you're all just okay with that? You're walking around down there, you're like buying stuff, going to Taylor Swift concerts, fighting about house prices. Meanwhile, there's a whole government conspiracy that you guys are like, we'll find out about that later. It blows my mind, guys. Truly blows my mind. So here's what it is. I've always been, in a healthy way, fascinated with the JFK conspiracy, who did it, Oswald, Ruby, all of these different players. I don't know why only two came into my head at that moment. So I have stuff in my classroom. I've always had the JFK movie in my classroom, so kids have noticed it. Mostly they don't ask about it because they don't know what it is. But this year, I was at Aberfoyle Market in Guelph. And as I was there, I came across the old time magazine photo of Lee Harvey Oswald holding the gun. Remember where the shadows were wrong, like the shadow under his chin and compared to everything else? Anyway, so I purchased it and I brought it to school and it was on my desk. And a little while ago, I guess 2 weeks ago now, I teach a grade 7 and 8 world issues class, if you will. It's sort of an extra class that we do on top of all the other curriculum that they already do. And the point of this class, the reason why I created it and the way I've structured it is very much on the basis of a few things. Number one, I want it to be timely. So I sort of pick things, I change the course every semester that I teach it. And I pick things that are timely in that year. So, for example, one of the units this year is AI. Of course, it's AI. We have to talk about AI. I will start them with Terminator, as you should. But then we'll go into all the different aspects about AI and benefits and consequences and downfalls and all of that kind of stuff. Skynet, that'll be a footnote. But nonetheless, so I have this magazine on my desk and I'm talking to the kids. We're actually in the diversity and equity unit. We're doing all this stuff. These kids are amazing, by the way. They're just like doing all of this research. I have it very much focused, not only on current events, but on them doing their research, not just doing a little bit of research, not just doing Wikipedia research, but doing research and then checking their research and then coming up with counter arguments to their research. So I have all of finding out what a legitimate source is. Why is it legitimate? How can I contradict that? All of those kinds of things. This is all at grade 7 and 8. And a lot of people will be like, Joanna, that's too hard for grade 7 and 8. And I would say to them, you don't know what a 12 and 13-year-old is capable of. They're brilliant, they're driven, and they really genuinely want to learn more and have big discussions. And that's another thing my course is focused on. Big discussions, big debates, critical thinking and analysis. That's it. I don't make them sit down once a month and once a unit and write a memorization test where they have to write down definitions and they have to write down years. No, that's not the point. The point is actually, I usually give them a critical question. They can look at their notes. They can they can look at their notes. They can look at their definitions. It doesn't really matter. But I give them critical and analytical questions that they then have to sit and think about and come up with some original thought based on the work we've done in that class, the work they've done, and the work their classmates have done, right? So it's very collaborative, but very much everybody's responsible for their own backyard, so to speak. So all of this is true. And this group of grade 7 and 8s, I don't know if they're listening. I don't want this to go to their head, but they're particularly fantastic this year. And I have this magazine on my desk, and one of them walks by and goes, what's that? And I said, oh, it's Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy that they said shot JFK. And he's like, well, guys, in that minute, And I don't know if all teachers can do this in all circumstances. I know I work at a very unique school and I have a very sort of breadth of I can do a lot of different things in my day. But at that moment, I sat back, I took a deep breath and went, well, now we have to add a unit, or now we have to add this in. So I said to the kids, I go, guys, who knows about the JFK assassination conspiracy? And maybe a few put up their hands. I'm like, what do you know? They didn't know much. I said, we're putting a pause on what we're doing. We'll come back to it. We're doing this now. And so I have JFK Oliver Stone in my hand. I said, we're going to watch this movie. We're going to talk about JFK. We're going to talk about, and I gave a little, like a brief kind of synopsis. I didn't want to lead them too much. I just talked about he was assassinated. They blame this one guy. The whole world thinks the one guy didn't do it. And this movie is basically reflecting on that culture and that time and that piece of Americana. And they looked at me and they go, is it a documentary? But first of all, kids like documentaries. Don't let them fool you. You put on a decent documentary and they are sold. They just don't want to be told it's a documentary. I said, no, it's not a documentary. It's fiction. But because it's fiction, it's going to be harder. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, guys, I'm not just letting you watch a movie. And they're like, oh. I'm like, we need to delve into the movie. We need to ask questions about the movie. We need to find out what parts of the movie were true, what parts were fiction, why the parts were fiction, how did that detract or add to the story. I go, we got to go all in here. So if you guys aren't all in, I get it. We'll go back to doing the other stuff we were doing, and all of a sudden they're all in. Okay. Now, for anybody that's seen JFK, there's a few scenes that, let's say, aren't PG. Even though the movie, I think, might be PG or maybe AA. There's a couple of scenes because there's the insinuation and the speculation that Clay Shaw, one of the main characters, played by, who was it, Tommy Douglas, is gay. But it's not just that he's gay and it's hidden and it's underground. So there's like scenes with like a whole bunch of people in a scene, maybe with it's not incredibly sexually explicit, but it's enough. I'm not showing it to my grade 7 and 8s. And there's a lot of drug use and stuff like that. So as we start, I go, guys, here's the deal. There's a few scenes that we're going to have to skip. They mean nothing to the plot of the movie. And they're like, oh, come on. And they're like, well, they must be violent or something. I'm like, well, no. Well, what's in them, Joanna? We don't want to miss any parts of this movie. And I said, listen, there's a couple of scenes that are sexually explicit. That's not for your age bracket. I'm not into that. And within those same scenes, there's some drug use. I'm not into that either. And they're like, oh, okay. Now, the funny part is I kind of have to sit right beside the thing with the remote control because I've seen the movie a lot. But I don't remember. There's like 3 times they kind of do flashbacks to the scene. And I don't remember exactly where they are. So I'm relatively nervous. You also should know this. I have my DVD player is a PlayStation. Yeah, a PlayStation. So I have a controller, not a remote. Like I have an actual PlayStation controller, which, all things being equal, I don't know how to use. I know how to press a bunch of buttons when I'm fighting Mortal Kombat, which is why I bought the system in the first place, but I don't know how to use it when it comes to DVD. So every time like I'm trying to fast forward, I don't know how to fast forward or skip a scene. So I'm asking the kids and they're saying, press 0, press X. It's a whole thing. But nonetheless, so I'm sitting right beside it with the controller in my hand, all the while thinking I'm just going to skip these couple scenes. Oh, that's not the case at all, guys. Because when you have a kid that's interested in something, when you have a kid that you've sparked something, and that's not me, it was accidental, right? It was an accidental thing. They saw the magazine. I had a 5-minute conversation. All of a sudden, I found a room of 14 kids going, yes, we want to do that. My ability to pivot to that is something that I'm very proud of and something that is very sometimes difficult to do as a teacher, but it's definitely something I wanted to do. But don't think that I just created it magically and all of a sudden was interesting. I kind of, it was fished, right? Like I kind of like threw out something, I reeled them in. I'm like, oh, I got a big one here. They like this. So I'm sitting there, and as I'm sitting there, I don't know if you guys remember the movie very well, but the first 10 minutes of the movie, maybe not even, it goes through a whole bunch of things that happened sort of right as Kennedy becomes president. Like just everything. It talks about the Vietnam War, the military industrial complex, Bay of Pigs, FBI, CIA, the mob, who got elected, beating Nixon, bought stolen election by Joe. Guys, there's so much information jam packed into that 10 minutes. I can't even explain it to you, but I had to explain it to them because every time they listed something, the kid would put up their hand and they say, "Oh, what's that? Military industrial what?" And I'd pause the movie. Now, here's the beauty of it. You know, sometimes you have to like force kids to take notes. Like it's a real tooth pulling exercise. I said to them, "You're going to be doing an assignment on this. Actually, we're going to be doing 3 assignments, but you're going to be doing a written assignment on this. So it's good if you take notes as we go. So if there's something you don't understand or you don't whatever, they ask me and we'll pause it." I didn't know how deep kids sometimes there'll be classes that be watch the whole thing and never really care, and they'll go do it later off Wikipedia. But these kids stop me at every term, right? Military industrial complex. What is that? Who's Eisenhower? How long was he president? What did he do? What was the CIA? When was the CIA created? What kind of powers do they have? How is that different than the FBI? Guys, it took us a period to get through 10 minutes. This is how this movie was going to play out because it's very, very dense, right? So I'm answering all of these questions. I give them background into the mafia and Joe Kennedy's connections. I give them background to the CIA, the FBI, Eisenhower, Vietnam, the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, all of it. So I'm painting all of these different pictures. And as I'm painting these pictures, they're writing furiously because they're like, well, this is important. Bay of Pigs, right? And some of them have their phones and they're typing 3,000 words per minute. And I get to like the Cuban Missile Crisis and they're like, what, can we watch that movie next? Because I have 13 Days and that's a great movie based on Robert McNamara's journal during that time period. Anyways, they're in. They're 100% in. Now, after that part goes, we then get into the movie. And I'm still sitting there because, well, I'm terrified of those like 3 scenes with Tommy Lee Douglas and who was it? No, not Al Pacino. I can't remember the other character. Kevin Bacon was in a lot of those scenes. Kevin, you made my job very hard. But nonetheless, so I'm sitting there and I'm pausing often. Okay. So we find out the assassination happens right away. And the kids are like, wait, but we want to see the film. I go, guys, wait. I go, this is the long play. This follows Jim Garrison. They're like, oh, but he's not a real guy. I'm like, yes, he is. They're like, what? He really, and I go, the whole movie is about building up to the trial. He is going to take, this individual, I try not to ruin it for him, this individual to court for the conspiracy. I said, this whole movie is a build to the trial. And they're like, oh my God, that really happened. I said, yes, it did. But there's going to be all of these pieces as we go through. Some of them are going to be provable fact that actually happened, and you're going to be able to double check that and go back. And some of them, Oliver Stone made up and perspectives he made up, especially when we get to the tail end and some of this sort of grandiose expectations on what could have happened, what might have happened. But also the what might have happened that happens in the trial, that's all Jim Garrison. Okay? Real guy, real trial, real closing remarks. So a lot of those remarks would have been true. Guys, it's taken us a solid week to watch this movie, and they are in every day. They are absolutely in. And tomorrow, they want to rewatch the court scene because there's a lot of information that they're like, well, Joanna, there was just so much. Like, did they actually arrest that person and never actually, take their witness testimony? Did that person get taken down to the station, but they were never in the Warren Commission? Why wasn't that person in the Warren Commission? Guys, I'm about 5 minutes away with this group of kids having a fundraiser so we can raise the $4,700 and buy all, 26 volumes of the Warren Commission report. They're in. That's how deep they're in. Okay? Because there's a scene where he starts to read. He's like, what is he reading? And I'm like, well, this is the Warren Commission. I explain who Earl Warren is and then blah, 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 blah. Totally in. So we're going to have to go back and do that. Now, that's amazing and that's fantastic. And I know that this is really, really heavy, muddy sort of levels of academia and thought and analysis and review. And I get it. Nobody's looking for these 12 and 13-year-olds to do this perfectly. but I'm looking for them to do it with passion, with intelligence, and with a level of work ethic to understand that truth is muddy. I'm a history teacher, guys. I'm a social science teacher. Truth is muddy. There's a quote that comes near the end of the thing. And if I stop the movie and I say, guys, you got to take this note, it's like I have 14 stenographers, all little tiny stenographers ready to go. Okay, go ahead. How do you spell that? What? What did she say? How did you spell that? So there's a very famous quote at the end of the movie. I think it's Shakespearean. And it says something to the effect of, and I'm sure some of you will correct me in my comments. I don't have it in front of me right now. Treason doth never prosper, for if it does, they dare not call it treason. And I told the kids that, and they're like, okay, they all get it down. They understand what doth means, and they're okay. They're like, what does that mean? And I said, well, guys, the people that win, the people that win the wars, the people that win the battles, the people that win revolutions, they get to frame and structure what they did and how they got there and how heroic and masterful and impressive it was. And then they get to write, because they have all the power, all the money, all the control, then they get to write about who the losers are and all of their failings and all of their shortcomings and all of the horrific things they engaged in while this other heroic side was taking center stage. I said that's very much true in a lot of ways. And in history, really important for them to understand, the idea of there being a clean black and white answer to anything doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. But the cool part of this course is that what matters is your quest to get as close to the truth as you can, read as many sources as you can possibly get a hold of, listen to perspectives, listen to analysis, listen to other people's opinions and what sources they draw information on, because that is a level of critical power, intellectual power. And if you can do that, there's nothing stopping you. I don't need you to take a test to memorize that. I need you to bust your butt every single day. So guys, they're all in. Now I'm not going to stop there. I know I'm giving you guys a little bit of a lesson plan. So there's a written part. So right now they're in the thick of the weeds, so to speak. So their job is to create bullet notes of things that were true in the movie and they can prove and how they can prove them. And I need citation, the whole 9 yards, and things that were absolutely false, they can prove them otherwise. And then a third piece of paper about things that they can't prove to be true, but nobody can prove them to be false. They were conjectures. They were, guess, their best guess given the information that they had. So I have them making this sort of three-pronged attack at trying to get at the information. And then I send them away, and one of my students goes home and because we got to the magic bullet theory, and he's a sketch artist. He recreates the magic bullet theory on this piece of paper. He goes, Joe, I did something last night. Do you want to see it? I said, yeah, I do. Hands it to me. I wish I had it with me right now. Guys, it is sketched perfection of the magic bullet theory. And if you've seen the movie, there's a sketch that happens. There's like this drawing where he shows how the bullet went through both Connolly and JFK, and he's redone it. I'm like, this is amazing. I go, are you just an artist? He's like, I'm okay. Guys, he's not okay. Fantastic. So project number 2. So project number 1 is the academic one, the debate, the discussion, and we're going to have lots of discussion and debate as we're doing it as a class, because they're going to research, come back and talk, research, come back and talk. Then we're going to do he's going to draw it bigger. So he's going to sketch this bigger, maybe, like a good size canvas. And what we're going to do then is find quotes and pieces of information and pictures and whatever. And we're going to fill the bodies with a whole bunch of facts and pieces of evidence and visual images. So it fills both of their bodies. And we're going to draw the magic bullet theory. And I said, guys, I want you to start thinking of things that are metaphoric for this. And they all sit there and look at each other and they're like, metaphoric? What do you mean, metaphoric? Did you look up, somebody type in metaphor? Here's what I mean. We do art We don't just want to do what it is. We want to do maybe what the implications are. So, for example, the big question of this movie isn't who shot JFK. I go, the big question of this movie is, and I wait, and one kid, swear to God, typing their whatever, why? Now, it was said in the movie at some point. And I'm like, why was he shot? The who is the distraction. Why is what matters. We get lost in the who, what, where, why, who, what, where, and when, because it's easy and it's clear and it's like very discernible. But the why, guys, the why is where history lives. The why is politics. The why is human nature. The why is every cultural revolution and amazing or horrible thing that has ever happened in this world. It is the why that matters. I go, so when we're drawing things like the bullet, I don't want you to think of it as he was killed by a bullet. I want you to think about it, and I want you to give me a metaphor about the bullet representing the why. And some of the kids start giving examples. Well, power, control, things like that, right? So we're tossing that back around. But I just want them out of their head. Because I feel as though young kids get stuck, unfortunately, and this is a huge problem in the educational system. We have a lot of kids to get through. We want them to do really well. We want, them to get a good breadth of information. But by doing so, we don't give them a lot of time to think and be creative and be critical and really sit with thought. We're too busy trying to get them to memorize so many, who's and when and how. We too many memorizations of all of those points, especially in the social sciences. But the why is where the magic happens. So we're starting to talk about that. And I go, guys, I think we have to do another project. And they're like, what do you mean another project? I'm just like, by the way, this is extra, right? I'm just stacking these projects up. And I said, listen, and we get to the end. And I said, you see that scale model he showed? And they're like, yeah. One of those kids looked at me and goes, you want us to build that? I said, yeah, I do. And you could see them all kind of go, well, how are we going to, like, very much backpedal, right? Because on the movie, I mean, it's a beautiful scale model of it, right? It looks intimidating. I go, okay, listen, guys, we're going to spend a little time. We're going to do a little research. There could be a kit. There could be whatever. We will find people and cars to be scale, and we'll buy those. You're not going to make people. And then everything else we'll make to scale. And I'll get boards and we'll hang it in the school once we are done. You've done this amazing, fantastic piece that people will look at and go, JFK assassination. So I sprung that on them today. So they're looking at that and they're going, okay, but you can see them right now kind of going, what can we use for the grass? Okay, we could paint that. How are we going to build the bridge? You know what I mean? Like what kind of, and so what I did, of course, is I went down to the art teacher and I said, listen, I have these two great ideas. What do you think? Can you pivot a little bit in your class so we can wheel this in at the same time? And I was like, absolutely, we're in. Now, it's amazing when you get that, right? And I know a lot of you are asking, where's your rubric? I could give a crap. I'd say that to the Ministry of Education myself. They have learned more in a week than most grade 7 and 8s have learned in social science all semester. And that's no damnation of anybody else. That's just simply because I was able to pivot. Now, at my school, Metro's different, okay? We have 5 courses a day. The grade 7 and 8s go a lot longer. They actually do hour courses. It's hour periods. It's way different than elementary school. But I've often said, I think that we treat our grade 7 and 8s too much like children when they're actually brilliant young adults. And not only are they brilliant, not only are they smart enough to do everything, and I've said this to them many a time. I'm like, guys, you could run a household. And they're looking at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, you can learn how to cook. You can learn how to do laundry. You can clean. You can take care of your animals. You can take care of your siblings. What task couldn't you do at your house right now? Let's say that your parents can do. One of the kids put up his hand. Well, my dad's a plumber. I'm like, pause. Nobody's trying to be a plumber. Nobody's a hero. I'm not, I can't, I have to call somebody. There are always people that adults have to call. Adults can't do everything. I go, but you're that smart. So when you step into my classroom, I'm treating you like that. The world might not treat you like that. Your parents may or may not treat you like that, but I am. So my expectations are here. Now, for some kids, it feels a little overwhelming in the beginning. So for those kids, you tell them how great they are more often. Right? But what I have found is that if you give kids a space to think and express themselves and bat ideas back and forth, it's amazing how much more creatively analytical they actually are, because they don't yet care as much about what their friends have to say around them. The guy or the girl they have a crush on. They're not quite there yet. So they're not too busy. They don't, if they're wrong, oh well. Right? Because when kids get into grade 9, puberty hits, and it's the great equalizer. And so when it hits, it mutes that. It mutes all of that. Not for every kid, not to the same degree, but it really mutes that. And it makes them they're very much more aware of marks, and they're very much more aware of tests and who got what and what did you get and what do I need to get into the right university, because if I don't do that, I'm going to die alone and sad. Whereas grade 7 and 8s aren't there yet. So the point of this class and the point of this assignment, to reiterate, is to get them inspired, to get them committed, to get them understanding how hard it is to dig to the truth, how much work they have to go through, how many different alleyways they are going to have to go down. But that is learning. That is education, not the paper at the end. Not the paper at the end. So by the time they're in grade 10, 11, and 12, and they go off to university, those skill sets are firmly embedded, and they're firmly embedded with the knowledge, I hope. My goal in life is they walk out of my room and they think and they know that they're smart, capable, intelligent individuals with the ability to critically analyze, come up with original thought of their own that matters, that has weight, that people want to listen to. Adults are impressed by. And that is what's going to change the world. That's my whole goal as a teacher. So I'm going to walk you through this whole thing as we go. We've watched the movie. I'm going to sort of try to do different pieces of this as we can. Maybe a podcast, I'll show you their final art project. I'll show you if I can negotiate it, because I'm not technically amazing, their final art project, and the scale model. But as for the rubric, and as for this critical marking scheme, I say this. Every once in a while, you have to pivot to something they love, something that touches them, and it really depends, that touches their intellectual curiosity, that puts something off in their head. And now it's not all of them equally, right? Some are more interested than others, but on the whole, you have to pivot. You have to adjust, because if you do, if you can get at a way of their learning and a spark that I hope they won't forget when they're sitting in a class that doesn't give them the same kind of energy, and they'll be able to find it for themselves. They'll be able to say, wait a minute, there's alleyways to go down here. I can do all of this stuff. I remember Joe's class, I had to read this and then this and then this and then this, and I still didn't get to the truth, but the truth wasn't the point. Getting to the truth and digging for the truth was, and making sure I had a credible source. And what does that mean? That's it. That's it. So I'm going to take you guys along for the ride with me. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. I've actually had quite a few people that have reached out and said, oh my God, I have this old newspaper. By the way, they're fascinated with, I had a kid that brought in an actual newspaper from the day after. They are fascinated by any of it. So I have people all over the place sending me different artifacts from the JFK assassination to sort of really have a better touchstone with these kids. Right. And as we go, ask me any questions in the comments, add anything you think I should add, or any sort of pieces that you think I'm missing, or maybe you should talk about this, or maybe add this. I'm going to add some different clips of documentaries. I would love to hear your opinion. I would love to hear what you guys have to think. And for now, I will leave you, but I will see you next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat station. Dismissed.